My wife cheated with her boss. Then I found out she stole $250, $0 from our joint account. And now she's claiming I poisoned our marriage to hide her affair. I never saw the betrayal coming. I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story, but here I am. It all started with a gut feeling I couldn't shake, like a random itch in the back of my mind that just kept growing. My wife, Emily, was always a little high maintenance. She liked her designer clothes, her fancy vacations, and a lifestyle that seemed just a little out of reach for someone like me. We'd been married for 6 years, and honestly, I thought we had a pretty good thing going. Sure, she could be bitchy, quick to throw fits if things didn't go her way, but I figured that was just her personality. But then, little things started changing. She became more secretive with her phone, always keeping it close, even when we were in bed. She'd get defensive if I asked who she was texting. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just stressed at work or dealing with some personal stuff. But then, I noticed her spending more time away from home, excuses piling up. She'd say she was working late, meeting friends, or running errands, but something felt off. She was acting different, more distant, more guarded, like she was hiding something. One night I decided to check her phone when she went to the bathroom. I know, trust, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. I never expected to find what I did. Her messages with her boss, Mark, were right there in plain sight. It wasn't just innocent flirting either. They were talking about meeting up, planning secret weekends together, and she was calling him babe in some texts. My stomach sank. I couldn't believe it. Emily, my wife, was cheating on me with her boss. And not just that, there was more. I found bank statements that showed she'd been withdrawing money from our joint account, $250, zero over the past 6 months, just gone. That was when I started putting the pieces together. The secret trips, the late nights, the money disappearing. I felt like I was hit by a freight train. My mind raced with questions. How long has this been going on? How much? Does he know? Was she planning to leave me? I was furious, devastated, and completely blindsided. I felt like I didn't even know the woman I married anymore. She always played the victim, acting like I was paranoid or overly suspicious whenever I brought up her odd behavior. But now I knew the truth. Everything was a lie, and I was just the fool who trusted her. The worst part was how she lied so convincingly when I confronted her. I remember walking into the kitchen, holding her phone and just blurting out, "Who the hell is Mark? What's going on, Emily?" Her face twisted into this perfect mask of innocence, like I was the one losing my mind. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "It's just work stuff. You're jealous as usual. You always think I'm cheating, but I'm not." She looked me dead in the eyes and told me she'd never cheat, that I was just insecure. But I knew better. I saw the texts, I saw the money trail, and I knew she was lying. That moment, I felt my blood boil. I wanted to scream, to yell, to shake her until she told me the truth, but I kept my cool because I knew I had to think carefully. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I'd always been a straightforward guy, work hard, provide for my family, keep my head down. But this was something else. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. It was like my entire world was crashing down piece by piece. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. Not with my money, not with my feelings, not with my life. I spent the next few days just trying to process everything. I couldn't believe she'd do this to me, to us. The woman I thought I knew had been hiding a whole other life. I kept replaying the moments before I found out, her secretive texts, her sneaky trips, the way she avoided my eyes. It was like she had been planning this for a long time, and I was just some idiot who didn't see it coming. Every time I looked at her, I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that? And yet, I also knew I wasn't going to be the one to just roll over and accept it. I wasn't raised to be a fool, and I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I decided then that I'd find out everything, expose her lies, and decide what my next move was. I had a lot of anger, but I also had a plan forming in my mind. She thought she could hide her affair, steal our money, and keep me in the dark. Well, she was wrong. I was going to make her regret every second of it. That's where I'm at now, trying to figure out how to fight back, how to take control of this mess she created. And honestly, I don't know how this will end, but I do know one thing. I deserve better than this. After that initial shock, I knew I couldn't just sit around and let her keep lying to my face. I started digging deeper, more carefully this time. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable, something that would blow her entire facade apart. I spent the next few days watching her like a hawk, noting every little detail, every suspicious move. I also hired a private investigator, just to be sure I wasn't missing anything. Call me paranoid, but I needed to see if she was still sneaking around or if her affair was just a one-time thing. Turns out I wasn't paranoid. The pie came back with some shocking intel. Emily had been meeting Mark at a fancy hotel downtown more than once. Not just for work-related meetings, but for secret weekends, nights, whatever you want to call it. They'd been sneaking around for at least 6 months. I saw pictures of her coming out of the hotel, dressed to impress, her hair done up, her face glowing. It was sickening. She looked so happy, like she was living a double life. Meanwhile, I was home, clueless, pouring my heart into this marriage. What really drove the point home was the bank statements. I had the evidence in my hand, withdrawals for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands made in cash. She'd been draining our joint account little by little, trying to hide it. The total: around $250, $0. That's not chump change. That's a small fortune. I couldn't believe she'd been stealing from us, our future, our savings, while she was out screwing her boss and planning her escape. I felt sick just thinking about how much she'd lied, how much she'd stolen. I confronted her again that night. I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. I slammed the evidence onto the table. Look at this, Emily. The bank statements, the hotel receipts, the texts. How long has this been going on? Her face immediately turned defensive and she started with her usual bullshit. You're overreacting. This is just work stuff. You're jealous, insecure, I've told you that. She tried to brush it off, but I wasn't buying her act anymore. I could see the guilt all over her face, the way her hands trembled when I showed her the photos. Her excuses were pathetic. She said Mark was just a friend, that the hotel was for a work seminar, that I was just imagining things. She claimed she was stressed, that she needed the affair to feel alive again. I almost laughed. How pathetic. She was trying to spin it, act like she was the victim. But I knew better. She was the villain in this story. I was furious, but I kept my voice steady. I told her I didn't want to hear her lies anymore. I wanted her out of my house, out of my life, and I wanted the truth, nothing less. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed on every level. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with my life, had been screwing her boss behind my back, stealing our money and lying to my face for months. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing with questions. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this and then turn around and act innocent? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind or just too trusting. Honestly, I felt like a fool. But beneath all that anger, there was also a deep sadness. I kept thinking about the life we had built, our home, our memories, the plans we made, all gone now. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a chasm of betrayal I couldn't escape from. I wondered if I even knew her anymore. Maybe I never did. Maybe she'd been pretending to be someone she's not all along. The thought that she'd been lying to me for so long, hiding her affair and stealing from us, made me feel sick. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I knew I couldn't just break down and cry about it. I had to do something. I decided I'd gather all the evidence I could, think carefully about my next steps. I didn't want to act impulsively. She was good at twisting things around, and I didn't want her to manipulate me into making a mistake. I also started considering legal options, thinking about how to protect what's left of our assets and what to do about her, especially now that I knew she'd been stealing money. For now, I kept my distance. I didn't answer her calls or texts unless I absolutely had to. I needed space to think, to plan. I felt a strange mixture of rage, sadness, and a sense of betrayal that cut so deep I wasn't sure how I'd ever recover from it. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a very long, very complicated fight, and I was determined not to be the one who walks away without justice. The days that followed were a blur of planning and trying to keep my composure. I knew I couldn't just confront her again without solid proof. She was good at twisting words, and I had to be smart. So I spent hours going through every detail I could find, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that could turn the tide in my favor. I also reached out to a lawyer, just to see what my options were if I decided to take legal action or separate formally. I wasn't ready to jump straight into divorce, but I wanted to be prepared. Meanwhile, Emily's behavior became even more manipulative. She started playing the victim, crying about how I don't understand her, how she was so stressed at work, and how I was accusing her of things she didn't do. She would act like the innocent wife, the one who's been betrayed by her own husband. It was infuriating. I'd catch her in little lies and her excuses kept changing. One minute she'd say she was just having emotional affairs. The next, she'd claim she was just venting to Mark, that they never actually had sex. But I knew better. One night she came home, late, smelling like perfume, her eyes red and puffy. I could see the guilt all over her face, but she still tried to hold her head high. "I was at a friend's house," she said, brushing past me. "I didn't buy it." I followed her into the bedroom, where I found her hiding her phone behind her pillow. That was the last straw. I grabbed her arm, pulled her back, and demanded she give me her phone. She hesitated, then finally handed it over, muttering something about how I was crazy and paranoid. I scrolled through her messages, and sure enough, she'd been texting Mark that night. They had planned to meet again. I saw a message where she called him my favorite, and he responded with "can't wait to see you tonight." That confirmed everything. She'd been lying to my face all along, pretending she was working late or hanging out with friends. I felt my stomach turn. My mind raced with anger and betrayal. How could she do this to me? How could she lie so effortlessly? I decided I'd had enough. That same night, I sat her down and told her I knew everything. I told her I was done playing her game, that I had the evidence and I was going to take action. She started crying, saying I was overreacting, that I didn't understand her, that I was just jealous because she was so much better than me. She screamed, she begged. She even accused me of poisoning our marriage just to cover her tracks. It was a classic move, trying to make me the bad guy so I'd back off. But I wasn't falling for it. I told her she could lie as much as she wanted, but I was done trusting her. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, had been cheating on me with her boss, stealing from us, and then trying to gaslight me into thinking I was the bad guy. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I didn't see it coming. She always played the victim, but I saw her for what she really was: selfish, manipulative, and utterly unfaithful. I was furious. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. I finally knew the truth, and I wasn't going to keep living in denial. In the days that followed, I made a decision. I was going to fight for what's mine. I contacted the lawyer again, started gathering financial documents, and prepared myself for what might come next. I knew she was probably planning to spin her lies, to make me look like the crazy one, but I had the evidence now. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into staying silent. I also started thinking about how to handle the money. That $250, $0 she stole, it was a clear sign she was willing to do whatever it took to cover her tracks and escape. I had to protect what was left, and I had to do it fast. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. But there was also a part of me that was determined. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life. I was going to stand tall and fight back. Whatever came next, I knew I'd have to be strong, because I couldn't trust her anymore. I could only trust myself to do what was right. And deep down, I knew I deserved more than this betrayal, more than this pain. It was time to take control of my life again, even if it meant starting over from nothing. The next step was obvious, but it wasn't easy. I had to confront her again, this time with everything laid out on the table. I called her into the living room, handed her the stack of evidence: screenshots, bank statements, hotel receipts, and watched her face twist in disbelief. She tried to deny everything at first, of course. "You're blowing things out of proportion," she said, her voice trembling. "You're just jealous because I still look good and you're insecure." That was her go-to line, always shifting blame, always playing the victim. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her she wasn't going to manipulate her way out of this one. I said, I know about Mark. I know about the money. I know everything. And honestly, I don't think I can trust you anymore. Her face darkened and she started crying, big, exaggerated tears, the kind she used to use to get her way. You're crazy, she whispered. You're just trying to ruin me because you're insecure and you can't handle the fact that I don't love you anymore. That moment, I felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness. I'd loved her. I'd built a life with her. And now I was standing here, realizing she'd been lying to me for years. I told her I was done with her lies, done with her manipulation. I said I wanted her to leave, that I didn't want to see her face again until she could be honest. She screamed at me, calling me paranoid and accusing me of trying to control her. But I didn't care. I knew the truth and I was finally ready to face the consequences. That night I packed her things. It wasn't easy. Every box, every piece of clothing felt like a punch to the gut. But I knew I had to do it. I couldn't live with a woman who had been secretly screwing her boss, stealing from us, and lying to my face. As I carried her bags out to her car, she kept yelling, trying to guilt-trip me, telling me I was jealous and insecure, and that I'd regret this. But I knew better. I knew I'd never trust her again, not after everything I'd seen and heard. After she left, I sat alone in the silence of the house. It was strange, so quiet, so empty without her. I kept replaying everything, trying to understand how I'd been so blind. How could I have missed all these signs? How could she have lied so convincingly for so long? The betrayal cut deep, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I finally knew the truth. I finally saw her for what she really was. I'd been played for a fool, but now I was free to make my own choices. I started focusing on my finances. That stolen $250, $0 was a nightmare, gone, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I contacted the bank, reported the theft, and started legal proceedings to freeze what assets I could. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace where that money had gone. I knew she'd try to hide it, but I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I also reached out to some friends and family, telling them what was going on. I needed support, and honestly, I needed to hear that I wasn't crazy. The emotional toll was intense. I felt betrayed, angry, and broken, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I was finally taking control of my life again. I realized that trusting blindly had led me here, and I'd have to be smarter from now on. I'd been naive, thinking love and loyalty were enough. Now I saw the truth. People can hide their real selves behind a mask for a long time. I had to be cautious, protect myself, and rebuild what was left of my trust in the world. I spent the next few weeks trying to put the pieces together, trying to heal. I knew I'd have to face the fallout from her departure, legal battles, emotional scars, the mess of losing someone I loved and trusted. But I also knew I couldn't keep crying over spilled milk. I had to move forward. I started focusing on my work, my friends, and figuring out what I really wanted from life now that I was free of her. I realized I'd been living in her shadow for too long, and now it was time to reclaim my own life. Looking back, I see how naive I was to believe that love could fix everything. That betrayal opened my eyes to how dangerous deception can be and how important it is to trust but verify. I don't regret catching her. If anything, it's the wake-up call I needed. I just wish I'd seen the signs earlier, but that's life, I guess. You learn the hard way. Now I'm just trying to rebuild, to find a new sense of stability, and to remind myself that I deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. Because if I've learned anything, it's that some people aren't worth the pain they cause, no matter how much you love them. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, emotional upheaval, and trying to piece my life back together. I won't lie, there were days I felt like giving up, days I wondered if I'd ever recover from the betrayal I'd endured. But I also knew I had to keep pushing forward. The first thing I did was finalize the divorce. It wasn't easy, especially with her trying to drag things out, claiming she was sorry and still loved me. But I refused to be manipulated again. I had enough proof now, her lies, her affair, her theft. I had to cut ties and move on. The financial aspect was the hardest part. That stolen $250, $0 was a nightmare, gone, but I wasn't going to let her walk away with it. I worked with the forensic accountant to trace every penny. Turns out, she transferred some of the money to offshore accounts, and some she'd hidden in fake companies. It took months, but we managed to recover a significant portion. The legal fight was exhausting, but I was determined to get what was rightfully mine. I also filed a police report about the theft, knowing that she'd face serious consequences if she continued to hide her tracks. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the emotional fallout. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and angry. So angry I sometimes wondered if I'd ever get past it. But I also started therapy, trying to understand how I'd let someone manipulate me so deeply. I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my money, my future, and she'd thrown it all away for a fling. That realization stung worse than anything. But the therapy helped me process my feelings, rebuild my confidence, and learn to set boundaries. I realized I'd been too trusting, too quick to forgive, and that I needed to be more cautious moving forward. One thing I learned is that revenge doesn't always come in the form of lawsuits or financial recoveries. Sometimes, it's just about reclaiming your life and refusing to let someone else's betrayal define you. I started focusing on myself, getting healthier, picking up old hobbies I'd abandoned, reconnecting with friends who had been there through everything. I also made a point to surround myself with people who valued honesty and integrity. I realized that the best revenge was simply living well, despite what she'd done. I also found unexpected support from some of her friends and family, who saw through her lies and told me I deserved better. That made me feel less alone. I started dating again, cautiously, but with more awareness. I learned to trust my instincts more, to listen to that little voice that's always telling you when something's off. I've come a long way from that naive guy who believed in fairy tale marriages. Now I know better. I know that sometimes love isn't enough, and that loyalty is everything. The biggest lesson I've learned is about boundaries, what I will accept and what I won't. I refuse to be a victim anymore. I refuse to let betrayal define my future. I've become more self-aware, more resilient. And I've realized that sometimes the best thing you can do when someone hurts you is to walk away and rebuild from scratch. It's not easy. It's messy, painful, and sometimes lonely. But it's necessary. Because at the end of the day, I've learned that my worth isn't tied to someone else's lies or betrayals. It's about how I pick myself up, how I move forward, and how I choose to live honestly and true to myself now. So, yeah, I guess this whole experience has changed me. I'm more cautious, more guarded, but also more aware of what I deserve. And I want anyone reading this, if you're going through something similar, to know you're not alone. Trust your gut, protect yourself, and never settle for less than honesty and loyalty. Because if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that some betrayals cut so deep, but they can also be the catalyst for a new, stronger beginning. And honestly, I'm starting to believe that better days are ahead. Looking back now, I realize that the whole ordeal was one of the most painful experiences I've ever gone through, but also one of the most eye-opening. It forced me to confront a side of myself I never knew, strength I didn't think I had, resilience I didn't believe was possible. I've learned that betrayal, no matter how deep, doesn't have to break you if you're willing to face the truth and pick up the pieces. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your sense of self-worth after someone has tried to destroy it. One thing I've come to understand is that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired, but it can be replaced by self-trust, by the support of good friends, and by the belief that I deserve honesty from the people around me. I've become more cautious, yes, but also more aware. I don't rush into things blindly anymore. I listen to my instincts and pay attention to the small signs that I once overlooked, because if I hadn't, I might still be living in denial, still trusting someone who was never truly loyal. This experience has also taught me the importance of setting boundaries. I no longer tolerate lies or manipulations. I refuse to let anyone make me feel small or insignificant. My worth isn't defined by her betrayal, but by how I choose to respond. I've learned that walking away from someone who doesn't value you is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. That's what I did, walked away, and in doing so, I found a new sense of freedom I'd never known before. And the money, that part still stings. Losing that much of our savings was a blow I never saw coming. But I've come to accept that some things can't be recovered, at least not entirely. What matters now is protecting what I have left, making sure that I don't get blindsided again. I've learned to be more cautious with my financial and emotional investments. Trust is earned, not given freely, and betrayal is a lesson in being more vigilant. Most importantly, I've come to realize that life goes on. No matter how shattered you feel at first, you can rebuild. You can find happiness again, maybe not the same kind you once had, but something better suited to who you are now. I've started focusing on myself, my goals, my future. I've also learned to forgive, not necessarily her but myself for trusting her at all. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. So here I am, a man who's been through hell and back but still standing. I don't have all the answers and I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I am stronger than I ever thought I was, and I refuse to let betrayal define me. Instead, I choose to see it as a catalyst for growth, a painful but necessary step in becoming a better version of myself. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts, protect your heart, and don't be afraid to walk away when someone shows you they're not worth your trust. Because in the end, your happiness and integrity are what matter most. And no matter how dark the night gets, the dawn will always come.